Hello, this is David Wales for sprint number 3 for game 377, and I think I completed everything for this sprint. So first things first is I'll go over the issues I was pointed out with your comments from last time. So the main things code-wise was these two, it seemed. So basically this week, one of the things that was an issue was that I was calling the updating data for the collision volumes in the set position, set rotation, and set scale functions inside the game object. And it was doing an if statement before to make sure if it was even registered for collision. And you had pointed out that that was not optimal. And so I fell back to what you had said to do previously, which I believe is just to go through and just update all the variables just one time every frame. So what I do here is in Collidable Manager, I just iterate through all of the collision groups and then call the update variables function, which is here, and that just goes through all of the registered collidables and updates the variables, and then in the collidables update variables, it just calls the collision strategy, and then update data. So it's only being called once a frame, because this is just being called in the scene, I believe. And then that solved that problem. Now the next thing that was an issue was inefficient testing. And that was because of I was not allowing for the quick out, so I was doing bools and then seeing if they were all true at the end. So I changed it, like you had said in class, to just be one big statement. That way, if this is false, then it doesn't even have to evaluate these next two. So that fixed that. So now on to this week, I'll show you what I did. So at the moment, this right here is, my tank is a OBB, while these are AABBs. So I don't know if you saw the forum post, but I was having a lot of issues with this, and I ended up figuring it out, and it all had to do with finding the axes, because I was just getting I was using the world matrix to find them, and I didn't even need to do that for the AABBs. So I ended up getting that fixed. So, as you can see right there, barely going in, and it's registering collisions. I can, even go the other way, not collision, collision. So, it seems to be working. I seem to be able to do it fine. So then I can switch the cottages to AABBs as well, and then see collision and give it a viewpoint. Okay. Collision is right on the line there, it looks like. Not collision, collision. Seems to be working. So then that tested the AABBs versus OBBs and OBBs versus OBBs. So then one of the other things you might notice is that I ended up successfully doing what I wanted to implement this week, which was to allow for the camera to also be attached, in a sense, to whatever object, and that I was able to do it, as you can see. And I can have two different types of rotation, or two different types of being attached. I have the orbital, which is where the camera is, and then I have the mimic, which is what I called what the tank top is. So it just mimics exactly what the tank does, and then of course it has controls of its own. So then next is, I'm pretty sure this. Next is this is an OBB and these are spheres. So if I can get a good one. So then here. See, not colliding, and I think the next frame it'll collide. No, maybe not. This frame. So there's that. Deletes them. there's collision, so that worked. Try to get a better view here. Let's see if I can. Ah, I paused it. Okay. So here we go. Right there. There's collision. So it deletes it, deletes it. There doesn't seem to be any false positives that I can tell, so it seems to be working. I'm not entirely sure how else to show that. It's kind of hard with the demo I have, but I suppose I can actually just do this real quickly. So in the cottage, I can also show you this. I made my set collider be an easy little way to switch what collider it is. So I can do B-sphere here, and then if I start the game up, then all of a sudden all of the cottages are B-spheres. So let's see if I can get close in. Seems to be colliding correctly there. Don't think there's any false positives. It doesn't seem to be. There doesn't seem to be. So I think that is sufficient showing of what's happening with my collision. So now I'll just move on to my code and do that real quick. So the main things were obviously the collisions. So I put those in a single location so that I could call them all very easily. So like in AABBs, for instance, I call just tools, test collision, this other. For all of these, as well as all of the other collision volumes. So what I do in tools is just all of the different formulas, or all of the different ways, I guess, with which to test. So here I just create a vector and a vect array, and then just fill it up with all of the vectors that need to be, all of the axes that need to be tested, and then it tests them. Here's just for ABBs, B-sphere, B-sphere, OBB, AABB, OBB, B-sphere, and the only difference that obviously between AABB and B-sphere versus OBB and B-sphere is this right here, I believe. There's also this. So that wasn't too hard. That actually was fairly quick. It was the axes that gave me all the trouble. But this is my SAT axis test. It just goes through, finds the minimum and maximum points after being projected onto the axis, and then it tests the interval, and then it returns true or false, and then that determines if there's a collision. So then, I suppose next I should go into what I did for my own little project. So this week I just kind of started going over some planning. Obviously this is probably going to evolve and, get much bigger as planning goes ahead, or, when I'm coding it I'll realize I need something else. But for now, I've been looking at like Unity's physics engines, and granted I'm not doing a full physics engine, but a lot of the functions that they allow for users I've tried to implement, like raycasting. That was a big one. Besides that, I figured I just need some accessors to get all the vectors and the matrices and such. Here I was just using these as placeholders. Obviously they'll change when I switch them over. And nothing is actually filled out at this point. It was just kind of a general planning area where I could add functions and I could look at later. There'd be, on the physics manager, there'd be a set gravity, and you can change the gravity if you would like. There's force on the physicsable. I also don't like the name. I'm going to try and think of a better one, but that'll come in time as well. I tried setting this up. Part of the reason why I redid attachables last week was to try and get a feel for how I would set up the physics stuff, and I think I got a pretty decent sense of it. I'll just show some of my attachable stuff that I did for this week. So, with my attachable, this week, since I wanted to do the camera thing, I needed to implement a orbit versus like a mimic type. So, I go into my attachables now. I have an enum with orbit and then mimic, which is why in here I could pick, the T-bot attach the top of the tank, and I want it to mimic. And then attach the camera to the bottom of the tank, and I want it to orbit. So all I did there was I had a struct here, attached object, and what it did is it just kept a pointer to the attachable and a pointer to the attachable strategy, essentially. And I just had to change some of the things on here, so like attached object, and nothing major in this. But then I had to implement the attach strategy, which just had a pure virtual function update, and therefore I could implement the orbit attached and mimic attached. And all they did differently was here same thing I did last week. I just copy and pasted the math into here. But the orbit attached, I had to I looked up a formula, obviously, and figured out how to get it so that it would rotate smoothly and it was accurate and everything. So it seemed to have worked out, and I'm pretty happy actually with how my attachable subsystem turned out. I think that this will be the last week I'm working with it. I can't really think of anything else I'd like to add to it. Next week, I'm not entirely sure what I want to add at this point. I'm hoping to get an idea the next day or two. But I think I went over everything. So yeah, my physics, I'm just kind of planning it. This week I implemented the attachable collision volumes. One thing I did forget to mention was I did, obviously, as you had recommended, I made just a little hierarchy here with the box collider, and then underneath that was derived classes, OPB and AABB. So that worked out fairly nicely. That wasn't any huge leap from what we've done previously, but I was able to implement that successfully, and it all worked out. So I think everything is done. I implemented everything successfully, so I'll see you in class today. Adios.